Chapter 7, Theory of Cognitive Development. The brain cells and regions. The number and size of the brain nerve ending continue to grow until adolescence. Some of the brain increase in size is due to myelination. Myelination is a process in which many cells of the brain and nervous system are covered with an insulating layer of fat cells. This increases the speed at which information travels through the nervous system. Other important fact that we must know about this process. A. Myelination in the process of the brain related to hand-eye coordination is not complete until about 4 years of age. Letter B. Myelination in brain's areas that are important in focusing attention is not complete until the end of the elementary school year. Another important aspect of the brain development at the circular level is the dramatic increase in connection between neuron or nerve cells. Synapses are tiny gaps between neurons where connection between neurons are made. The connection that are used will become strengthened and will survive, while the unused one will be replaced by the other pathway or will be disappear. These areas are critical to determine whether synapses will be strengthened or will survive for higher order cognitive functioning such as learning, memory, and reasoning. One of the fascinating recent discoveries about the adolescent's brain focus on developmental stage in the areas of the brains that involve emotion and high level of cognitive functioning. Amygdala, a region of the brain that handles the processing of the information about emotion. The prefrontal cortex is especially important in high-level functioning. Prefrontal cortex. This is the very last part of the brain to mature. How the brain cells work. There are used electrical impulse and chemical signal to transmit information between different areas of the brain and between the brain and the rest of the nervous system. Before I forget, good day everyone. I'm Reynalyn Macy Sabaybay reporting. The two theories in understanding cognitions are presented in the next reporter.
Good day everyone, my name is Alexis Rose Miergas. Today we'll be discussing the cognitive process. Cognitive development involves changes in cognitive process and abilities. Piaget's view, early cognitive development involves processes based upon actions and later progresses into changes in mental operation. The key concepts. Number 1. Schemas. A schema describes both the mental and physical actions involved in understanding and knowing. Schemas are categories of knowledge that help us to interpret and understand the world. Number 2. Assimilation. The process of taking in new information into our previously existing schemas is known as assimilation. Number 3. Accommodation. Another aspect of adaptation involves changing or altering our existing schemas in light of new information, a process known as accommodation. Number 4. Organization. Piaget's concept of grouping isolated behaviors into a higher order, more smoothly functioning cognitive system. The grouping or arranging of items into categories. Number 5. Equilibration. Piaget believed that all children try to strike a balance between assimilation and accommodation, which is achieved through a mechanism. That's all po. Thank you.
Budget stage of cognitive development. Number 1, the sensory motor stage. The first stage of Piaget's theory lasts from the birth to approximately age to end. Is centered on the infant trying to make sense of the world. Behavior are limited to simple motor response caused by sensory stimuli. Children utilize skills and abilities they were born with such of looking, touching, grasping, and listening to learn more about the environment. Substage of the sensory motor stage. The sensory motor stage can be divided into the 6 separate substages that characterized by environment. Reflect 0 to 1 month. During the substage, the child understands the environment purely through inborn reflexes such as sucking and looking. Primary circulatory action 1 to 4 months. This substage involves coordinating sensation and new stimulus. Secondary circulatory action 4 to 8 months. During this substage, the child becomes more confused on the world and begins to intentionally repeat an action in order to trigger a response in the environment. Coordination of reaction 8 to 12 months. During the substate, the child starts to choose clearly intention action. Tertiary circular reaction 12 to 18 months. Children begin a period of trial and error in experimentation during the fifth substage. Early representational both 18 to 24 months. Children become to develop symbols to represent events or objects in the world in the final sensory motor substage. Piaget believed that an important cognitive accomplishment in infancy is object permanence. A second accomplishment is the gradual realization that tree is a different or boundary between yourself and the surrounding environment.
Piaget's stages of cognitive development. The pre-operational stage. The pre-operational stage occurs between age 2 and 6. Language development is one of the hallmarks of this period. Piaget note that children in this stage do not yet understand concrete logic, cannot mentally manipulate information, and are unable to take the point of view of other people, which the term egocentrism. During the pre- During the preparation stage, children also become increasingly adept at using symbols, as evidenced by the increase in playing and pretending of example. A child is able to use an object to represent something else, such as pretending a broom is a horse. Role-playing also become important during the pre-operational stage. Children often play the role of mommy, daddy, doctor, and many others. Egocentrism. Piaget used a number of creative and clever techniques to study the mental abilities of children. One of the famous techniques is egocentrism, which involves using a three-dimensional display of mountain scene. Children are asked to choose a picture that showed the scene they had observed. Most children are able to do this with little difficulty. Next, children are asked to select a picture showing what someone else would have observed when looking at the mountain from a different viewpoint. Invariably, children almost always choose the scene showing their own view of the mountain scene, according to Piaget. Children experience this difficulty because they are unable to take on another person's perspective. Conservation. Another well-known experiment involved demonstrating a child's understanding of conservation. In one conservation experiment, equal amounts of liquid are poured into identical containers. The liquid in one container is then poured into a different shaped cup, such as a tall and thin cup or a short and wide cup. Children are then asked which cup holds the most liquid. Despite seeing that the liquid amount were equal, children almost always choose the cup that appears fuller. Piaget conducted a number of similar experiments on conservation of number, length, mass, weight, volume, and quantity. Piaget found that few children show any understanding of conservation prior to the age of 5. Many of these operational examples show a characteristic of thought called centration, which involves focusing or centering attention on one characteristic to the exclusion of other. Centration is most clearly present in preparational children's lack of conservation. The idea that some characteristics of an object stay the same even though the objects might change in appearance.
The concrete operational stage and formal operational stage. Concrete operational stage. The concrete operational stage begins around age 7 and continues until approximately age 11. During the time, children gain a better understanding of mental operation. In the third or concrete operational stage, from age 7 to age 11 or 12, occurs the beginning of log-in child through processes and the beginning of the classification of objects by their similarities and differences. The concrete operational stage for 7 to 12 years, the thinking of concrete operational children involves around what they know and they can experience through their sense or what is concrete. A key cognitive accomplishment for a child in the concrete operational stage is understanding or conversation. Conversation means refers to the idea that an object can does not change its weight, mass, volume, or area when it changes shape or appearance. Let's come now to the characteristic of the concrete operational stage. First, duration, the ability to order items along a quantitative dimension such as length or width. Second, transitive inference, the ability to create or order items along a quantitative dimension mentally. Third is spatial reasoning. By the age 8 to 10, children can give well-organized direction to important places. The formal operational stage begins at the 12 to adulthood. During this time, people develop the ability to think about abstract concepts. Skills such as logical truth, deductive reasoning, and semantic planning also emerge during this stage. Piaget believed that deductive logic becomes important during the formal operational stage. Deductive logic requires the ability to use a general principles to determine a specific outcome. This type of thinking involves hypothetical situations and is often required in science and mathematics. Stage of cognitive development. Formal operational stage. For 11 to 15 years and adult, people develop the ability to think about abstract concepts. Skills such as logical thought, deductive reasoning, and systematic planning also emerge during this stage. In earlier stage, children use trial and error to solve problems. Children at the formal operational stage of cognitive development are often able to quickly plan an organized approach to solving a problem.
Vygotsky theory of cognitive development. Born into a middle-class Jewish family in Orsha, a town in the northern part of Byelorussian, and moved south to Gomel. Little is known about Vygotsky, youth except that in his early years he was educated by a private schools for his secondary education. As a young child, he was interested in verbal arts literature, poetry, theater, and philosophy, and would lead discussion on major topics in these areas. Because of this, he was often called the Little Professor. He attended the University of Moscow out of chance and pursued degrees in medicine and law. He also taught at Gomel's Teachers College, where he started a small psychology laboratory. It was during this period between 1917 and 1924 that Vygotsky became more deeply committed to fields of psychology and education. He took charge of creating a Marxist theory of psychology and child development, aiming to reconstruct the fields of psychology and education in the Soviet Union in ways consistent with the social and cultural changes taking place around him. He published a number of important articles in special education, or what was then called defectology, the psychology of children with mental or physical disabilities. He died of tuberculosis in June of 1934. Vygotsky theory assumptions. Number 1. Learning precedes development. 2. Development involves the internalization of signs acquired by an individual from others so that he can think and solve problems by himself or herself. 3. The zone of proximal development is the level of development immediately above a person's present level. Learning takes place when a child is working within his or her zone of proximal development. 4. Scaffolding is the support for learning and problem solving which can be clues, reminders, encouragement from other people, older or peer, breaking the problem down into stages, providing an example or anything else that allows the student to grow in independence as a learner. The key influence. Three characteristics mark Vygotsky's work. A sincere dedication to Marxist social philosophy and conviction that psychological development was intimately linked to the tenets of philosophy. A throughout acquaintance with the work of leading European and American psychologists of this day and earlier dedication. Great ingenuity in devising methods for studying children and for interpreting the data his methods produce. In coming up with his theory, Vygotski's work has two major goals: to create a Marxist psychology that would both solve problems in the field of psychology and to guide people in a newly designed country.
The study of how language influences thought has a long story in a variety of fields. There are two bodies of thought forming around this debate. One body of thought stems from linguistics and is known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. There is a strong and weak version of hypothesis, which agree for more or less influence of language on thought. The strong version of linguistic determinism agrees that without language there is and can be no thought, while the weak version, linguistic relativity, supports the idea that there is some influences from language on thought. The main use of language is to transfer thoughts from one mind to another mind. The bits of linguistic information that enter into one person's mind from another mind cause people to entertain a new thought with profound effects on his world knowledge, inferencing in subsequent behavior. Language neither creates nor distorts conceptual life. Thought comes first, while language is an expression. There are certain limitations among language, and humans cannot express all that they think.
The zone of proximal development. When we heard the word the zone of proximal development, this is the distance between what a learner is capable of doing unsupported and what they can do supported. It is the range where they are capable only with support from someone with more knowledge or expertise, the degree to which children can rapidly develop under social guidance as compared to alone. The concept zone of proximal development was developed by Soviet psychologist and social constructivist Lev Vygotsky. The zone of proximal development has been defined as the distance between the actual development level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. Vygotsky believed that when a student is in the zone of proximal development for a particular task, providing the appropriate assistance will give the student enough of a boost to achieve the task. To assist a person to move through the zone of proximal development, educators are encouraged to focus on three important components which aid the learning process. The first is the presence of someone with knowledge and skills beyond that of a learner or a more knowledgeable other. Second is the social interactions with a skillful tutor that allow the learner to observe and practice their skills. And the third one is the scaffolding or supportive activities provided by the educator or more competent peer to support the student as he or she leads through the ZPD. Breaking it down to levels of learning, the zone of proximal development can be imagined as a stage model of learning. With each child leveling up, the ZPD is the subsequent stages that the child can climb on to achieve a level up by the support of someone older, parents, teachers, etc. The idea of development here is a qualitative and quantitative changes in the motor, behavioral, and cognitive abilities.